something interesting.
Welcome back to the worst channel in all of YouTube. I'm the talentless hack behind the camera, DipperGames420, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Figuarts Cooler Final Form figure. Finally, I have just a little bit more to say about this one. It came out in September last year at a retail price of $80, at least in Japan. The US had to wait till December to get him. I suppose that's enough rambling for now. Let's take a look at his box.
They just started saying it publicly in front of cameras.
What we are very proud.
Cooler's box is basically the exact same as every other Figuarts box you'd be getting these days. In front of the box you got the Figuarts logo, his name, pictures of him, the colored background, Snake Stone toy stickers, Tamashii Nations Quality Seal, Bandai, Tamashii Nations, Dragon Ball Z, Bandai Collector's Shop logos, designed by Tamashii Nations in Japan, Bandai Spirits made in Vietnam. A little bit off screen. On the top, you got a picture of him. On the side, you got some other pictures of him. Cooler Final Form on the bottom. On the back, you got a whole bunch of pictures of him and some blurbs that ultimately don't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. Side of the box, you got Cooler Final Form and his name reiterated on the bottom. And on the very bottom of the box, you got a picture of him and his name reiterated once more. Without further ado, let's finally get Cooler out of his box.
Robert Beefswagon died in 1952 of a heart attack at 2. He was a lifelong drug dealer.
So here Cooler is out of the box, and this is one of those situations like Super Boo where I knew he was going to be big, but I didn't quite anticipate how big he was actually going to be until I got him. And let me tell you, this is a hulking beast of a figure, as you're about to see, because we're going to stand him next to some other figures. Here he is next to Standard and SDCC Goku, Android 18 and Launch, and lastly, Demonki.
Nothing bad ever happens to the Kennedy line.
Moving into Cooler's paint and sculpt, I'd have to say Tamashii did a fantastic job with this figure. The head is sculpted with all the little fins poking out. It's a nice sort of rough texture applied to the plastic, and it really elevates this figure a little bit. English, motherfucker, do you speak it? The lines etched in, and at first I would have been upset that they weren't painted, but ultimately I can't say I'm too upset about that. And they're all done the same sort of way, matte plastic, rough texture, lines indented, very nice. The sculpt work on the figure is absolutely spectacular. There's a lot of musculature detailed all throughout. He looks just generally all around phenomenal. All the wrinkles in his hand are detailed, muscles in his arm, his traps, his other arm, his abs, even his sausagey giant tail is modeled in just ridiculous detail, and it looks absolutely superb. The blue areas are reflective and glossy. They look pretty damn nice. Even down to his feet, even down to his giant ass feet, they did a really nice job. They really thought of everything when it came to making this figure as good as it could possibly be. Eyes are very nice, bright red, a little bit of a glossy finish to them. So yeah, all around, Tamashii knocked the aesthetics of this figure out of the park. Did they knock the rest of this figure out of the park? Let's find out.
Enough is enough!
And here is everything Cooler comes with. And it's kind of lackluster. If you don't count the tail as an accessory, you get an alternate head without his mask on for a smirk, an alternate pair of feet for grabbing or flying, and then 3 pairs of hands, the death beam pointer hands, the grappling hands, and the open palm key blast hands. It's a kind of meh array of accessories, But at the end of the day, I mean, the rest of the figure is already really well done, so I'll at least give Tamashii Nations a little bit of slack here. But I do feel like an effect piece or a flight stand would have helped him out a little bit. That said, that's really just me nitpicking him, because he's still really fucking awesome. So, that about does it for accessories. Let's move into Cooler's articulation. Articulation wise, Cooler has a barbell joint in his head, which allows him to look about that far up, that far down, that far side to side. You get these little hinged armor pieces that move out of the way. Full 360 at the shoulder. And cross his chest, not that much, unfortunately. Bicep swivel, double joint at the elbow, wrist pivot and swivel if it wants to work. Yeah, some of these things just don't work sometimes. There we go. Alright, wrist pivot and swivel. Ab crunch, you can lean that far forward and that far back. Off to the sides can go that far. Not too shabby. You can actually get a full 360 out of his upper torso. Do be warned, the spikes are about as sharp as they look. Tail can go full 360 and hinge back and forth. Midsection of the tail does the same thing. And his legs can split that far out. Can only really kick forward because kicking back they gave him an ass for some reason. I don't understand why, but they did. Full 360, almost full 360 thigh swivel, double joint at the knee, and a ball hinge at the ankle that is engineered kind of weirdly. Pegs almost straight in, so that basically means rocking it is a little more tedious. You can only really rock it inward before it wants to pop off. Even then, it doesn't take much to pop it off to begin with. So that about does it for Cooler. Let's move into my final thoughts on this figure.
No!
As for my final verdict on Cooler, I think this is a very solid figure. There are definitely issues with him, don't get me wrong. I personally think the way they did the legs was very stupid. Because not only does the lower waist sometimes like to get stuck on the top of the legs, but he also can't kick back at all. That, and in some regards, he does suffer from some of the typical Vietnam problems. Not as many as usual. He tends to move around just fine. But my copy started to loosen up on his head after around 5 times of me switching his heads out, which is nothing for some of the other figures I got. That, and whenever I leave him still for a long amount of time, I really have to break his arms back in before they can move. So there definitely are some issues with this figure, but they really don't outweigh those positives, because holy fuck, this thing looks amazing. It looks just like how he did in the remaster that you see on Amazon Japan. It looks dead on to that. Sculpt work is phenomenal. The shading is great. Everything about the aesthetics is amazing. And the articulation that does work is very, very nice. So generally speaking, would I say Cooler is worth it? Absolutely. I was a little squeamish with him being on Premium Bandai and all. I suppose that's not the right word. I was a little bit fearful of his QC because of him being on there. But now that I have him in hand, I can absolutely say he is one of the very few Premium Bandai figures that is actually somewhat worthy of being put on that site. So this has been the Games 420, and I will see you guys next time.